Blue state attorney generals want due process rights removed from male students who get accused of sexual assault on campus. No word yet from blue state attorney generals about prosecuting Joe Biden for assaulting Tara Reade. Hashtag selective outrage. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with a fight for due process on campus as 18 Democrat-controlled states are suing to take away the rights of young men to defend themselves from sexual assault charges on college campuses. This story happened a couple of months ago, but it's in the news again for a reason. Betsy DeVos changed the Title IX parameters. She pushed back on the Dear Colleague letter that the Barack Obama administration wrote, basically urging public schools and universities to jettison fair due process rights, constitutional rights, whenever young men were accused of sexual assault. The Obama administration basically implied that when a woman says, or a girl says she's been assaulted, we should assume that it's true, not assume that the assaulter is innocent until proven guilty. Now again, the Obama administration knew they could not make that law, so it was a suggestion, and all of our absolutely shameless universities and public schools immediately took the hint and started persecuting young men, not allowing them to confront their accuser, not allowing them to see the evidence amassed against them, not allowing their lawyers to cross-examine the accusers. And that's why you have found over the last couple of years, after these kids, these young men are suspended, their reputations are ruined, they're outed on campus and mistreated. Finally, when it spills into a court, after all of these draconian and unconstitutional processes take place at the school level, federal and state judges slap them down. They put the kids back in school. They tell the universities they have overstepped their legal boundaries. Now, 18 Democrat states, including the Democrat Attorney General of Wisconsin, where we are, wants to remove the new protections. The Betsy DeVos's good job in reasserting the rights of all students to have due process. 18 Democrat state attorney generals want to remove that. What's going to happen when you elect the next Democrat president and the next Democrat House and Senate? They'll have full power to literally take away due process rights for your sons on college campuses.
All right, and I'll do all the legwork for mom and dad out there who are watching. Are like, is our state one of the 18? I'll list them off quickly. California, Colorado, Delaware, D.C., Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, and Wisconsin. Those are your 18 states that their attorneys general filed a lawsuit, again, against Betsy DeVos, and they're trying to block the department's final rule with Title IX, and it's supposed to take effect August 14th. So this is ramping up. We're going to see what happens in these next couple weeks or so to see where the lawsuit takes them.
Let that sink in. 18 attorney generals, the highest lawyers in the state, the highest elected, the most powerful lawyers in those 18 states are coalescing, they're conspiring to take away due process rights for men on college campuses. You can't make this stuff up.
Well, you could, because the media likes to make a lot up. But the lawsuit actually comes on the heels of another lawsuit that was filed by the American Civil Liberties Union.
The American Civil Liberty Union also wants to take away the civil liberties of young men accused of assault on college campuses.
Yes, both challenge the department's regulations that were released back in May, changing how institutions receive federal funding and must respond to sexual assault and harassment on campus. So, as always, it comes down to the dollar bills to see what actually happens with everything. Now, the lawsuit states that if permitted to take effect, the new regulations will, quote, reverse decades of effort to end the corrosive effects of sexual harassment on equal access to education. Your comments.
It's not equal access. Here's a classic example. In a tweet, Attorney General Gerbier Gruel of New Jersey said that attorneys, quote, won't stand by as the federal government undermines the civil rights of our students. So literally, what the New Jersey Attorney General says is that not allowing girls to prosecute boys without any protections for the boys is eroding the civil rights of the girls. Let me repeat that. According to this head lawyer, we will not allow girls to have to play by the rules when they're talking sexual assault. They have every right. It is a civil liberty for girls to lie about the boys, to make things up, to change their mind, to have no evidence. They have a civil right to destroy the lives of young men, and men have no right to fight back. We will defend that principle, says the Attorney General of New Jersey.
Gruel. Well, I would also just like to point out that it's not just men versus women, because
it could go the other way.
It can go the other way, so I don't want people giving us hate mail saying that. How dare you say it's
question.
But most of the time.
Can it really go the other way? Do you think a man who accuses a young male who accuses a young woman of sexual assault on campus, do you think that the university is going to deny her due process?
9 times out of 10? No.
99 times out of 100? I just don't see it
999 out of 1,000?
The protection is not for accusers versus victims or assaulters. The protection is for women. And so if a young man accuses a woman, she's the one who's protected, not him.
Well, this Gruel, his actual comment said that school discipline should be fair and equitable regardless of the subject matter. Unfortunately, the department has singled out sexual harassment cases and made it harder to find the truth and do justice in those cases alone.
It's harder to find the truth when you have a trial. Really? Yeah. It's harder to find the truth when both the accuser and the defendant have the same rights. Really? How'd this guy get a law degree?
Here's a story that I would like to say I was shocked I heard, but no, it's pretty much par for the course. The Virginia Supreme Court has ruled, this is actually a good thing, that when parents meet requirements of state homeschooling statute, they are authorized to teach their kids. Okay, that's the good part. This is the part where it doesn't shock me. Well, a case had come forward that the Supreme Court needed to hear after a lawsuit was filed by Kirk and Kristen Sosaby, who had been homeschooling their 2 kids. Well, they had submitted paperwork for their homeschooling as required by state statute. They were following the rules. But then the county they live in, Franklin County, the officials wrote back to them demanding that they not only have certified copies of birth certificates, but also proof of residency for their kids. So basically the government is trying to come in, and I'm surprised they didn't ask for a blood sample, quite frankly. But the Franklin County School Board currently requires their parents to submit children's birth certificates for schooling.
Yeah, so this is the same Virginia government that would never dare ask to see a illegal immigrant's driver's license, would never ask papers, right? You pull over somebody who doesn't speak any English on a traffic, you're not allowed to ask them any of this stuff, but we will turn around then and make actual citizens of Virginia who are Americans, we will actually make them provide birth certificates and all this other material before they'll allow you to homeschool your kids. And I go back to the opening statement. I don't think that is okay. The idea that the Supreme Court, that Virginia will only allow parents to homeschool if they follow the rules. There should be no rules. It's homeschooling. The reason you're homeschooling is you have to avoid the ridiculous policies and anti-educational manifestos of the state, right? The idea that you have to dot any I's or cross any T's to educate your own children is a travesty.
All right, well, at least the Virginia Supreme Court did, in a unanimous ruling, find that there is no statutory requirement that a parent provide a child's birth certificate or proof of residence. And they struck down the part of the local school board's policy as being inconsistent with state law. So you have to take a look at what's happening in your local schools, local county boards. They don't know what is actually the law versus what they just think should kind of be the law or how they should kind of handle it.
Yeah, we mentioned this before. It's amazing in the previous story. It's amazing to me how progressives are willing to violate the law because they know they've got these states have the people who are, the ACLU, the people who are attacking Betsy DeVos, they have batteries of lawyers, they have all kinds of money, and if they're going to lose, they're going to lose, but for the year, 2, 3, 4 years before they lose, they're going to make all the plaintiffs really squirm. And this poor couple, they homeschool their kids, for God's sake. They had to get a lawyer, they had to go through all of this, and they won. You're never going to get that time, you're never going to get that money back, but you won, and you struck a blow for freedom. It says, how sad a commentary is it that the courts are a more reliable place for justice than our state governments and our schools are? Given the craziness that we've seen coming out of the courts lately, that they're more reliably defending the Constitution than what elected state administrators who swore oaths to uphold the Constitution are willing to do.
Well, here's just another example of stupidity across the nation. At Fordham University, which is in New York, they've restricted access from the campus and actually had a student be forced to undergo political re-education, as they're calling it, political re-education over some Instagram posts that the university has deemed hateful and threatening, okay? The story is coming from senior Austin Tong. Okay, he was notified. He put up 2 Instagram posts. He was notified by Dean of Students Keith Eldridge, claiming that Tong had been found in violation of regulations relating to bias and/or hate crimes, and for threats of intimidation because of these 2 posts. Let's start with number 1. The first post was made actually following George Floyd's death. It was a picture, as you can see, of David Dorn, who is a black 77-year-old retired police officer who was killed trying to defend a pawn shop from looters during the Floyd riots. Okay, so we all
have this. A black officer defending black shop owners from violence.
Okay, and then Tong put his caption as saying, "Y'all a bunch of hypocrites."
Yep.
Because, as we know, you had George Floyd and all the outrage. You had this black police officer and poof, nothing. Okay, that's post number 1. Post number 2 is Tong himself. He's holding a rifle, which he legally purchased, and the caption reads, "Don't tread on me, hashtag 1989-64." And that's a reference actually to the event we know as Tiananmen Square, the massacre on June 4th, 1989. And that's during which, China's communist regime was happening, and they opened fired on hundreds of thousands, basically, of just pro-democracy demonstrators in Beijing, okay? Just peaceful protesters, as we're all told.
You're going to tell me that this kid now, because he, called out liberal hypocrisy, you're all mad about George Floyd. Everybody's looting and burning and protesting, but you have a black cop protecting a black-owned business that was then killed for it, and you have nothing to say. That's a perfectly valid statement. And he used the example of Tiananmen Square to point out what happens when tyrants run things. And now this boy's under investigation.
Well, Fordham students were outraged. They were hurt by what he did.
Jeez.
Yep, so they must respond. They accused him of, quote, inciting anger or failing to show unity with our black brothers and sisters or hurting minority groups.
Whoa. They accused him of inciting anger. That's not an accusation. That's not a crime. That's not a law. He just hurt your feelings?
My feelings, yes. Tong's response was that it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It's about appreciation of this country's rights, but they don't care. I had hundreds of comments, and then what happened was the school made a comment in my post that they would look into this. And so an investigation began, and they found that actually Tong should be punished. As part of his disciplinary probation, which will remain in effect until he graduates, Tong is banned from representing the university in any extracurricular activities or running for or holding leadership roles in student organizations. Tong can no longer enter the university campus without the dean's permission, and he has to finish the remainder of the school year through remote learning. In what Tong described as a Soviet nightmare, the university is also demanding him to complete implicit bias training with the Office of Multicultural Affairs and write an apology letter.
Name for me what he was found guilty of.
No, it doesn't matter. There was an investigation, and this is what we found.
But did they say what?
No guilty.
Did they make a statement?
No.
What did he do? They told us all those wonderful Soviet communist ways they're going to punish him, but they have not told us what he's guilty of.
Clearly hurting people's feelings.
Right,
and that's exactly why he must do all of these things in order to get his diploma. Luckily, he did say he is considering legal action, which I would.
Well, considering it.
Yeah, considering.
If you, young man, if you go along with any of that, without fighting it, then you've allowed them to change you. You don't need Fordham. You can get a degree somewhere else. Fordham doesn't want you. You are a member of a minority community that far too often is treated as if they were white people. That you don't get the benefit of the doubt. You don't get all the puerile juvenility and all the set-asides because you are Asian American and you can look after yourself. Your community has looked after themselves. You have done the right thing. You've embraced your new homeland. You recognize as your family came from the tyranny of China, you realize how important the Second Amendment is. You realize the hypocrisy of left-wing activism when it comes to race and life and death. You did nothing wrong. Fight them. Don't let them put you through these paces. Take them to court.
Well, and he already, after the investigation came out, by his response, has greater insight into what is happening in this country than any homegrown American when he said, coming to this country as an immigrant, one would think that America is a nation of law and free speech. Yet that is no longer the case. I was forcibly silenced, faced verbal and assaulting harassment from mobs, and subjected to Soviet-style interrogation and punishment by a Jesuit university that claims in its own code of conduct that it protects freedom of expression and the open exchange of ideas.
And that's what saves them, is because they're not a public school, a public university. The First Amendment enforcement is much laxer. But I still think, young man, with what you just said, let that be your lawyer's opening statement. You will win. You will win this case against Fordham, just like John McAdams won his case against another private Jesuit school, Marquette. Are you seeing a pattern here? Stay away from Catholic schools. They're not going to teach you real Catholic faith. Their faculty will set about unmaking Catholic realities for your kids, modeling anti-Catholic values, and when you do run afoul of the police, the speech police on campus, there will be no Christianity in the way they handle you. Save your money and go sail around the world. Save your money and use it to heat your house. Dump it into the furnace rather than give it to these ridiculous Catholic universities.
Here we are again, time for some real education. Have you ever heard of kite fighting? Me neither, but there is actually such a thing. Traditionally, most of the kites used are small, unstable, single-line flat kites where line tension alone is used for control, and an abrasive line is used to cut down the string or line of other kites. Kite fighting is done in many countries, but it's particularly associated with countries such as Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Vietnam, Korea, Thailand, and Brazil, among others. In India, fighting kites are known as patang.
And I'd like to talk about that for our instant classic today. Think about how lovely it is against a blue sky with scudding white clouds to see balloons, right? Multicolored balloons, right, against the backdrop as they hover and they bob with the wind. Now take those balloons and replace them with killer kites, and you got something. Take a look at this picture. These are fighting kites. They are patang. Patang is particularly the Indian word for fighter kites. And they have the beautiful colors there. And what they do is the kites are made with certain kinds of ridges that run down the spine that you can use to fly into the threads, the kite strings of other kites, and literally take them down. So, I mean, you've got battles in the air of brightly colored kites, right? It's a blood sport, baby. It's a blood sport, but it's a beautiful blood sport. Take a look at the next image there. A shop in India where you can see just the vibrant colors. It takes a lot of discipline. I know I was one of those kids who, whenever I tried to fly a kite as a little boy, got really frustrated. Really frustrated because it took more work and patience than I had. But to get them up in the air and to keep them up in the air, right? To get those kites up in the air and to maintain them amidst all of those circumstances of wind and weather and human error, and to use those kites to cut down other kites in the air is something to behold. Take a look at the size of that roll there that this particular kite fighter uses. This is not your dad's little fishing rod roll. This is a huge spool to keep that kite in the air. Look at the next picture, please. And you get a sense of just the gorgeous color, the power, and the sleek maneuverability of these kites and how they work. I mean, it's a 2-for-1, a beautiful engineering artistic creation that is both pretty and lovely and scientifically underwritten and destructive.
Hold my line. What are you doing? I got scissors by myself. Howard, come back! Victory!
All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for the Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Don't forget, the Dr. Duke Show is offered on more than a dozen podcast platforms such as Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Simply subscribe and consider leaving us that coveted 5-star review to keep the show growing. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. Tiananmen is named after the gate built in 1415. It means the Gate of Heavenly Peace. The Gate of China went through the center of the square until 1954 when they took it out to make Tiananmen Square larger.
Leave it to the Chi-Coms to take the Gate of Heavenly Peace and turn it into the gate of making waffles out of our citizens. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.